we're moving to the last panel discussion of the day, which is called "What is Globalization?" And I want to say that this panel is actually truly global because we have Rachel, who is joining us literally from the future. She's in Australia, and she is already living her Friday. And on the other hand, we have Doug and Tex from California, and we have our wonderful panel moderator, Yuka Nakasone, who is in Barcelona in Spain. So let's find what's globalization, right, Yuka?
Yes. Hi, Ego.
Hello.
Thank you very much for this opportunity because this is one of my favorite subject. Hi, Doug. Hi, Tex. We are waiting for Rachel. Konnichiwa. It's truly global. Rachel.
I think
she's in the future.
Yeah, she's in the future.
She's
so
in the future.
Waiting for Rachel, we can probably.
She was here yesterday, actually.
Oh.
Okay, we're still looking for Rachel, but just a reminder for everybody who is joining, or I don't know, they started not from scratch because we had a 12-hour marathon with all those presentations. So at the end, we will have everything recorded and split into multiple discussions, so people can easily browse those recordings and then watch at their own pleasure.
Yep. And there are so many good discussions that, yeah, I'm almost all, 12 hours in. Unbelievable. What shall I do, Ego? Should we wait a little more?
I believe we can actually start introducing our panelists, and we will hope that Rachel will join. Probably she has some technical issues, but yeah, we'll wait for her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're going to discuss what's globalization today, and Rachel is missing because she's in the future in Sydney, Australia, tomorrow, from me, actually. And the other wonderful panelists are here. Let me introduce Texin.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. He's based in Silicon Valley in California. Let me try to explain because he does many things as well. Texin, also known as internationalization guy. Is it true?
Yes.
Yeah. You have a website called www internationalization guy.
18N guy.
Yeah. So that's where you can find him. And Tex is a globalization consultant providing global product strategy, Unicode, and internationalization architecture and training. And he has created numerous global products, led internationalization development teams, and guided companies in taking businesses to new regional markets. And also, he contributes in non-profit activities. He's participating in creating several internationalization standards and open source software and other industry non-profit organizations. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that was all good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming. And so he's an engineer. Let's say, right? And another panelist, Doug, is I'm not sure if I can read his introduction because like this, but Doug Bruhnke, is this correct, Bruhnke?
In katakana, Bruhnke.
Bruhnke. Douglas Bruhnke, founder and CEO of the Global Chamber. What a name. And Doug is not not a professional in the localization industry, but he did stay in a Holiday Inn last night. Really?
You delivered that so well.
Yeah, he's a chemical engineer
Sorry
turned
about that.
global business executive when DuPont's executive in Asia retired and no one wanted the job. Then he turned into a global entrepreneur when he early retired, oh my God, and founded Global Chamber. Global Chamber is now growing in 525 metropolitan areas in 195 countries everywhere in the world. Doug hopes he'll be more than a weird curiosity today. Is it right? So yeah, and thank you for coming. And actually, if anybody's watching doesn't know Global Chamber, it's an organization like a little bit like Chamber of Commerce, is it right? Helping companies to go to certain region or certain country or certain city to develop their business and make money. Is it correct?
It's the only global chamber dedicated to the global tribe, people who are growing their business across borders. So yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So this is Doug, and thank you for coming. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, I'm so sorry I'm a bit late. I had some trouble connecting.
Oh.
Yay. Welcome.
Yay.
Hey.
Here I am.
So here she is, Rachel Carruthers. This is a challenging surname for me as well, for a Japanese. Did I pronounce it correctly?
It's Carruthers. Quite close.
Carruthers. Okay. And she's head of localization at Canva. Many of you know what Canva is, right? I mean, it's a graphic design platform. Is it correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she's looking over globalization at Canva, and Rachel and her teams help go-to-market strategies in key growth markets. They also focus on giving Canva users a product experience that feels truly local through localization of not just the platform itself, but the content within it. So that, Rachel, welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
So yeah, today we are talking about globalization and why I became so curious about this subject is when I was leading a globalization effort at Via Blue, which is a retail technology company in Barcelona. I was doing, let's say, internal presentation to evangelize localization and globalization internally. And I realized that my audience coming from different functions in the company had different notion of the word globalization. So when I said, I lead globalization at Via Blue, the reaction was very interesting. So I started to integrate what's globalization at the first of my presentation. That's how I developed this concept of what's globalization, and I like to explore a little bit about this with all of you today. And so first question, first we have to define what's globalization, right? So definition of globalization. Let me share the presentation.
Yeah.
So, yeah. definition of globalization. What does globalization means to you? Let's go around and tell us what it is, what it means to you. Okay, so first, Tex, can you
Sure.
go?
So globalization is originally a term that comes from economics, and it has to do with companies that want to participate in the global economy and enter into foreign markets. And that term became adapted by companies to describe the activities they had in adapting their products and services to different markets. So it went from an economic definition to one that companies use to describe their activities to get into those markets, and then it became a definition for those of us that design and support products and services, the actions that we take, which is to specifically modify the products for individual markets. And it came to be both internationalization and localization. Localization, as you know, is tailoring a product to meet the needs of end users, their cultural and linguistic requirements. And then internationalization, in my mind, is really two things. One is to remove assumptions about cultural assumptions from the product so that the a product or service can be used in any market, whereas localization is the adaptation of the product for those markets. But the other piece that I think is really important for internationalization is to be able to support these different markets efficiently. It's often the case that you can do lots of things to get into a market and modify your product to support a market, but it needs to be efficient over the life of the product, which has to do with supporting it as you produce new versions to make it to add new languages. And so it's really, for me, internationalization is about being efficient in being able to support these different markets and then make the job easy for localization. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the thing is, the slide, so you said that it came from the economical world, like general meaning is to expand business activities internationally, and it became a little technical. And in your world, this is globalization, is localization plus internationalization, and actually you're very specialized in internationalization as well, right?
That's
And
exactly.
it was very, very interesting because the panel discussion before Rodrigo led, they talked about ROI of localization. And Chris England from Active, sorry, I forgot the name of the company. He shared that this localization has to be defined really well. So I try to do it along with this this presentation as well. So that's that. And next, Rachel, would you like to share what's the definition of globalization for you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was there's an interesting note that you mentioned before, text with and that people have kind of echoed in the comments. Some companies and businesses and magazines swap meanings of globalization and internationalization.
Yes.
It's yeah, it's kind of a good segue, that comment, on how we look at things at Canva, actually. So somehow, somewhere along the line, the vernacular kind of lost its way a bit at Canva, and to the point where folks now say, IHN or international or internationalization for like literally everything that they interpret to mean non-English. So that can be everything from just the localization practices, everything that text has already reviewed, the actual components of localization when it comes down to internationalizing currency, the actual translation of the UI itself, everything like that. People take it to mean the engineering requirements, and that small fraction of people are actually the right ones. The IHN engineers, they take it to mean the bespoke content that we make, that type of production that's market specific, like the templates we produce. They take it to mean the very team that itself that's focused on globalization at Canva, our team, when our name is actually Global Services, and it houses localization, internationalization engineering, LQA, go-to-market localization and preparation. So it's quite interesting, and it's definitely helps to unpack what each of these things mean. But for me, and definitely in my role, I would say that the essence of globalization is really having localization, internationalization, those critical foundations, and growth and strategy functions sitting closely together in the larger company organization. And that's why we have built our team as such, Global Services at Canva. Having them sit closely together has really helped in my experience. This has fostered a higher degree of communication and collaboration between those co-informing areas. I'm sure a lot of you may be familiar with the scenario, but it's very easy to kind of peg localization and the practices in this one bucket, no matter where it is throughout the company. And oftentimes things can get thrown over the fence to localization, right? And then it becomes, they'll just deal with it. International will just deal with it. But I think in having these spaces closer together, you're helping, again, to kind of co-inform strategies. So, localization requirements are initially really defined by a company's growth requirements as well. So which markets do we want to go into? Why? What's the opportunity size? Everything like that. And so subsequently, we start growing our user base in a market after we've localized or launched a product there. And then as that environment starts to take shape, new growth channels or opportunities become apparent, which we need to localize for. And then it becomes this almost flywheel, right? To kind of take that marketing concept of growth and localization, the emergence of that go-to-market strategy as well, and however you might need to tailor that for a specific market. So yeah, for me, it's really having localization and growth almost be this marriage together to produce a strong globalization strategy.
Wow, you sound like a busy lady. Right? Yeah. So your world is not only the pure technical globalization, marketing strategy and research are included, like go-to-market strategy. And do you do execution or just the strategy side of?
We do bits and pieces. It kind of depends on the market and what the execution piece is. So we do execute a lot of the market research and stuff like that. We definitely execute a lot of the technical areas of localization specifically. But when it starts to get into the more business ops components, like legal requirements, entity, and everything like that, that's where our responsibilities end. And that goes more into the legal and FinOps and biz ops.
That's interesting because Chris' comment came from there. I'm going to explain you later. Then now, let's go to Doug's definition. would you mind sharing your thoughts about the definition of globalization?
Sure, Yuka. I think mine is colored by two main factors. Number one, as you pointed out, I am an engineer and I'm a chemical engineer, which perhaps makes it worse. Chemical engineers worry about systems because if you don't have the system working, let's say in an oil refinery, it blows up. And so I guess the good news for all of us doing global business, if we do a mistranslation or we set the wrong price or we make some other faux pas somewhere, it's usually recoverable. When a refinery blows up, that's not a good thing, and you're not going to recover from that. So the system matters. And so I've always approached everything that I've done, including my globalization work, in a system approach kind of way. And so that includes I come at it from a business side of it. So it's thinking about, how do we make a profit? We're going to spend some money and we want to get some revenue, and then how do we optimize that profit? And that includes doing the market research on the front end and the product development. So actually a lot of what Rachel talked about, probably, over a beer, we would probably agree on almost everything in terms of the definition of how this all works out, because she's growing a product around the world, and largely those are the things that I've been involved with. It includes the legal side of it, intellectual property and hiring people. So you're interested in immigration and hiring and firing related to that, anything related to HR services. You've got to pay taxes, you've got to do banking, you've got to do the sales, and so you've got to set pricing and decide who's going to sell your product. You've got marketing issues, you've got logistics and getting product in and out of ports, you've got, of course, all the cultural issues, and you've got language and translation. And so when I think of the things that of having both done and watched businesses succeed around the world and become globalized, it's a coherent package of activity and work. What we have against us as global people is that most of the people in the world are not globally minded, as I think all of us have noticed, right? When we go to a party, for instance, of just random people, very often they're very locally centered. Local is warm and fuzzy, right? It's jelly jars and hugs and kisses and local stuff, and that feels really good. And global is usually like our plant got bought by a foreign company, and it's negative stuff, and most people don't really understand that. And so that's certainly something that we have against us as we globalize, but it hasn't stopped us. And I think Kofi Annan was the one who said, arguing that globalization doesn't exist or that won't proceed is like arguing against the laws of gravity. It's happening, it's changing. We know it's, there's no way to stop this thing rolling down the hill. People will try to stop it, but, they're going to get run over. And I hope in my lifetime, I want to get to the point where we can embrace global as a positive thing. And certainly, all of the folks that I know in Global Chamber and many of the folks I see here that have been involved with Global Chamber directly or indirectly, we're active, we're having fun, we're changing the world, we're impacting the world, and globalization is definitely happening, and it's definitely something that's comprehensive and something that involves a lot of different factors. And that's one key thing for all of us to remember. It's not one function, it's a whole series of activities that have to happen if it's going to be successful.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a very comprehensive explanation. And I just took a mental note about global market, because this is another subject. What is global market for one company is a totally different discussion as well. And summarizing your discussion, so it's company-wide effort, all the business development activities necessary for product or service to be launched and or sold in a foreign market is your area of globalization. From marketing strategy research that Rachel does, and sales fulfillment, I mean delivering pre-post service product support, and you said legal, taxation, HR, everything, right? And as a result of all this, coming the maybe product marketing globalization that Tex discussed, like what about translation? What about internationalization? So that's your world. This is what I kind of understood. So we four are all working in the globalization industry, like that said, but there are different definition around this word. I think it's very important to have this in mind, and of course, having this knowledge, maybe we can take advantage as well. And when I think about globalization, a word, what it reminds me is this tale of an elephant and six blinds, like we saw right now. And maybe some people don't know about the tale. This is a famous tale from ancient India, I think, that there's a in a village. Once upon a time, in a village, there's 6 blind people, and somebody told them that there's a very unique animal coming into the village, and they wanted to see it. I mean, see it. They're blind, but wanted to see it. So they went to see the animal, and all these 6 people described what they saw. Of course, they are blind, and they touched trunk or leg or ear or the tail, and they described something totally different. Like an elephant is like a big snake, the blind who was touching the trunk. And actually, no, it's a tree stump. The one who was touching the leg. What are you saying? It is like a sash of leather. I mean, the ear. You're all wrong. It's actually like a little fairy mouse. Fairy mouse. It's the extreme of the tail was like a mouse. So all these are elephants. Everybody was right, but none of them described as a whole. So that's the let's say the spirit of the tale, and I think this applies to maybe internationalization or globalization, these words that we use. And let me stop sharing this now. So that's being said, who wants to go, like knowing this difference, what kind of advantage you could get from this kind of situations, or what you thought about hearing other people, others talking about this?
I'll check in, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So I guess a bit before I mentioned kind of that, obviously that a lot of people internally, again, at least at Canva, have these different interpretations of what international means. And so For me and for my team, every internal client or stakeholder having a different interpretation of what globalization or even international means to them really helps our function better understand what their primary objectives are. It's almost like an insight into their mind. People are very clear about what's most important to them, and off the back of that, we can help shape the globalization program or approach to best suit their needs. We act as kind of almost like a service, global services, within Canva to kind of help other teams approach what their globalization needs are, right? So it's a constant opportunity for education internally. And the aim for that, long term, is to really create self-sufficiency or self-efficacy with ownership of globalization and understanding of globalization and the different components, the differences between localization, globalization, internationalization, really being brought to life more autonomously over time. So in a perfect world for us, it's about helping them, set up a program, set up a project, whatever it may be. And again, being able to kind of step back and say, no longer needed here. So yeah, as the tie that binds across many different areas of the business, in that central service, we do have that opportunity to drive manifold impact, really. So rather than just a team of 10 of us working towards user growth, revenue growth for Canva, considering international audiences, we have the opportunity to expound that as many times over as the company has employees through this education piece and helping them understand the differences of what globalization might mean in their own world and in their own sphere.
Yeah, that's it.
I think I think the elephant example is a good one because it points out that even those of us who've worked for a long time in globalization, we don't know what we don't know, right? I see it as part of my role. One is to train and educate the organization about the things we do know about different markets and how we have to adapt the product, but also to consistently remind the entire organization that we always have to discover the things that might be different in different cultures and around the world that might surprise us. So we have to do research up front, and we also have to do quite a bit of market testing and experimentation to really understand whatever functionality we're offering, whatever our products are for different markets, how they will be received and perceived, so that we're not surprised and that we don't have the equivalent of Doug's oil explosion within the market, right? So we're fortunate today that many of the things that we do in internationalization and localization have been commoditized. You can take advantage of software libraries and lots of research material and design material that says, here's what you have to do, and here's software that will help you do it or do it for you. And yet people going into markets, and this is where I try to help them, you need to understand that it's not always 100%. And a lot of this depends on context. Those of us who have worked with colors, you'll see these color charts that say, here's what this color means. But it's not universal. That color means something depending on whether it's product packaging or used on clothing or used in some other context, and it can mean something completely different. And so we need to really focus on helping the organization be aware of this and to not be overconfident in their approach. And it's often the case that an organization, they only see their product and even their globalized products through what their goals are, what they're trying to do, and the message they're trying to deliver. But because they see it that way, they don't recognize that maybe there's another interpretation to what they're doing, which would be perceived in the market. because the market doesn't understand the message they're trying to deliver.
Mhm.
So it's really important that that companies do their homework up front, but then also test on the release end as well.
Yeah, that's a very important uh, step to take to test. And actually, I have a question because as a localization function, we have limited resources. As you said, what we don't know, right? You have, for example, Tex, you have so much of experiences, so maybe you can do more than most localization people can do. But for example, a localization function, which is mostly doing language, is, for example, asked, where is the next market we have to go? Like to Rachel. Rachel knows how to do that, but if we don't know what to do, what is the response to the company in that moment? We have to suggest, for example, talk to Global Chamber. Is that the answer? Or
Well, I think it relates to the picture, at least how I perceive the picture. It's somewhat insulting to the people that are around the elephant, and I don't think it's perfectly valid in real life that people want to do the right thing, but very often they're not informed of that. And so what's missing in that picture is who's sitting and leading the elephant on the top. And if they're doing a good job, they'll be able to inform everybody about, that this is a system, this is an elephant, and we're all working on the same team. When we talked about this program earlier, Yuka, I gave an example of one of the worst bosses I've ever had happened to coincide with me being transferred as an expat to Japan. And so I was sent to Japan to improve the business in Asia and Japan. And this is the Teflon business. So enough time has passed that I think I can say it was Teflon and a variety of other products, and everybody knows Teflon. So this guy was an idiot who was running the business, quite honestly. And so the first thing he did while I'm traveling to Japan to move with my family is to raise the price without asking. He decided that the US price needed to go up. So everywhere in the world was going to go up, even though that currency at that time, the price in Japan was like 3 times what it should have been. But he decided it had to go up. So our number one customer, my first job was like going in and apologizing and falling on the sword and losing business and fighting back for that business. So he made a bad decision, and he was horrendous. So to recover, he decided, well, I'm going to go to Japan and I'm going to save the day. So he shows up on a Friday afternoon, the day before we had a quality complaint, and we're basically on the verge of shutting down Mitsubishi Motors with one of our other products. He shows up in the office and everybody's scrambling on getting that solved, including me, although I was his babysitter, and he was expecting us to bow down at his feet, King Dave. Guess what? We were tied up with what was happening out in the marketplace. That's globalization, right? You have a headquarters, but you've got local people doing the right thing for the local company. And then finally, a third example of what an idiot he was that I finally, after another year or so, convinced the business to build a plant in Japan that would be comparable to the Japanese quality. It was absolutely the right strategy at the time, very forward thinking. They approved it. I go back to Japan, and then somebody in technology backbit me locally. Again, a lot of the challenges we have on global businesses, the people running these businesses are local, and they're really just kind of responding to things that are happening within their city block, and they don't really kind of connect to what's happening around the world. If they get pressure locally, they cave. And so that's what happened. This guy caved, did the wrong thing. They did build the plant 10 years later, but it was 10 years too late. So there are a variety of factors in those stories, but they relate to having a good boss who's sitting on that elephant, keeping people together, because it's not that they're dumb or they don't want to do the right thing. They just need to be coordinated and told what and guided in terms of doing the right thing. And then you're going to have real globalization and real forward moving.
Yeah. And in a company, that person or that function, what would it be? Like, for example, language group, localization group. I just don't think that they have whole knowledge about globalization. As we discussed, like there's some part missing from the business side, right? So somebody who has the business sense, business knowledge, has to be leading this globalization effort. From my point of view, that's what what should happen.
It should happen. It doesn't always happen, but it is a key part, is leadership and communication and back and forth. I mean, if there's nothing else that I would convey to everybody on this call and in this community is, keep pushing, because a lot of information, and a lot of times you have like the keys to the kingdom and people aren't listening. So don't give up, keep pushing, but also keep pressing to understand how it fits. I mean, we don't want to sub-optimize localization cost, for instance. At the end of the day, there's only so much you can spend, right? And there is a decision that needs to be made in all of these areas, legal and accounting and all of the different cost elements involved with a business. So that takes leadership in running a business. And a key part of that is having somebody who is really not just smart, but also recognizes that they have valuable resources and that localization is a valuable resource that they can count on and need to count on. So keep pushing, because that's critical.
I have a slightly different point of view. Because the way the conversation is focused now, it seems like there's one point within the organization that somehow is going to bring all of this together. And you can look at it from maybe there's an executive, global VP, maybe it's the localization project manager because he or she is talking to everyone around the world, but just as you would with let's say just an English product, you talk to the marketing folks, you get legal as a stakeholder, you talk to the sales office. You need to do the same thing globally, and you have to reach out, and certainly the localization folks can be a point of contact, but there should be marketing folks who are trying to address the market, not only the market information, but what the market reaction could be. And the same thing for the field office and the same thing for support. So we have to look at this systemically and holistically. And it's not like there's going to be one person who has a command of all of this, but there can be one or more people who drive, but we need to reach out and do these things. So
I meant to talk more about an executive team. I was thinking like you need a center, and then you need a logical executive team that has the different functions and a back and forth. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It's not one person, but if that one person is defective, it takes a village, to overcome that. And Rachel probably sees that all the time. I got to believe that with Canva's success, that you've got probably a pretty successful, pretty smart team. And I mean, if you don't, then it would probably be not very good to say so. But I got to believe that given your success, you've got a really good team.
And before Rachel responds, though, I just want to make the other half of the point, which is there isn't one point in the process where you do this. So it's often, you could mentioned earlier that localization is kind of at the fly at the tail of the dog that is being asked to fix problems at the end. But if internationalization and localization, especially for agile development, is brought in, early in the design process, where they can raise questions about what this means globally, as well as at other points down through the pre-release and release process. Throughout that is where globalization needs to be brought up and addressed. So it's not, I think you're right, it needs to be an executive team, but also it's not one point in the development process where these questions have to be addressed. So Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think to complement what both of you have said, that's exactly why I've built the team that we have today and made it the shape that we have it today. So it started out as but we started as simply a localization team, right? And taking care of, the manifold localization needs of Canva. But once we, as a company, and at an executive level, I suppose, as well, decided that localization, or it became self-evident really, that localization and therefore globalization was going to become such a key component for growth, because growth can mean so many things. It really became evident that I needed to build a structure that had this kind of what I call like hub and spoke model, where we are a centralized, kind of force, as you mentioned, Doug, like a bit of a, an executive team almost, but we have that cross-cutting insight to be able to help advise a lot of these different spaces whilst not necessarily driving them ourselves, right? Because if we were responsible for the operations and the localization and all the marketing channels and legal, that we would be the whole company at some extent, right? And so basically being able to have a function that helps the company to see the forest for the trees. And this function needs to have close ties with, C-suite, needs to have close ties with BizOps, everything like that. But we're really almost the champions, the evangelists of globalization. And again, going back to that education piece, whatever that might mean, whatever shape that takes with regards to a certain area of the business, we can help advise. But it's really being that kind of champion force. And then, yes, if I was to get into the hiring and immigration details of employees and full-time contracts within India, I would be far over my head and out of my depth. But fortunately, we have folks within the business who are plugged into the spaces and have this knowledge. So it's for us to be the champion of what needs to happen and have that really cross-cutting vision and lead that vision. And yes, to your point, Doug, be near impossible and quite obnoxious, frankly. I definitely think I'm probably considered one of the most obnoxious people at Canva. I don't mind, because it helps get things
you
done.
got to keep pushing. The only way progress gets made.
That's right. And it's what's best for the business, and it's what's best for our users as well. If we're really, from the perspective, again, if we're really pushing this mission to empower the world to design and democratize design, got to think about our users. And I bang that drum every day.
Yeah. And let me ask you a question, Rachel, then. So if somebody from admin department say, hey, we're going to this country and taxation should be taken care of by your team, would you take it?
Probably not, to be honest, because we're not finance experts. I think I would need to know what we mean by taxation. But if I alter that question a bit, maybe to look at pricing, product pricing, right? Not taxation. I understand. That is something that our team would help to look at, again, in a support and in an advisory capacity, saying, let's take a look at the types of users that we have in this market. What are their user behaviors, their existing user patterns within the product? Are they mobile users? Are they daily users? Are they monthly users? All of these things that we can kind of unpack. Are they more the free product users? Are they pro product users? What's the Big Mac index in that market? All of these things that we work on with the pricing strategy and analysis and data teams, and then ultimately the pricing team will actually implement that. So yeah, again, more of an advisory support function for sure.
Yeah, because it was the question from Chris England from Active Campaign. It was Active Campaign. He was asked from an executive that, oh, this is international, so this is yours, right? But he was like, oh my God, we are language service function. Should I say yes? I think he didn't say yes, but he kind of saying in the panel discussion that maybe we should have said yes to, to grow our efficacy, maybe efficacy of the group. I don't know. So in this case, for example, text or DAC, if somebody comes to a localization people or internationalization people saying, what should we do with taxation? What's your answer?
So my answer is okay.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I have to. I'm a software architect, and so, but it's not like I go off and do it on my own. I have to go and say, well, I need to understand the requirements. I need to, find experts in the legal community in order to be able to define what the correct rules are. And I have to be able to support that within the software. And then I have to talk to the localization people and make sure they're hooked up with the right legal folks to be able to get the right language to talk about these things. So I don't go off and do it on my own, but I start to build up a list of what's the kind of information I need. And if it's the first time we've done this and we've never done it before, I'm going to allocate a lot of time for it before we can ever get into a market. And I'll have to figure out who can do the testing for it. But I usually don't say no. I turn around and say, well, here are the resources that I need, and we'll build up a plan. So that's my approach to things. And
I love your approach.
Drives, well, thank you. That in turn drives the executives to start to think about what they need to do and what it means to support something like tax in a different market. And frankly, from a software point of view, we're always dealing with, there's VAT tax, there's local taxes. So we have to be able to design modules to deal with all of those kinds of things. So maybe Doug has a different perspective.
Yeah. So please, Doug. So what is the correct answer for you?
Well, I would say all of us should do what we need to do. An example of that for me was, Hyundai used to not be a very capable automotive company. And so I'm old enough to be part of their early days. And as a young engineer, I was called to go out onto their plant floor, and it was a disaster. It was just horrific. Quality problems. They sent me up to their fuel hose manufacturer in Daegu, and which I did. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, I'll go. And they wanted me to go out on the factory floor and help them make fuel hose. And I mean, there's so many aspects of this that were totally wrong, but I just, I kind of played along and I helped from an engineering perspective, how I could, there's ways that engineers approach problems. And so I helped a little, but I recognized that I was not the right answer. So I went back to corporate and said, look, I need our best person. And that best person didn't want to go to Korea. He just was like, no way in the world I'm not going. So I went to the big boss and said, this is a huge client of ours, great potential. We need Dave. And so they convinced him and told him, you're going to Korea. So here's how it got laid out. So he actually was brilliant and was great in the plant. However, here we are in Daegu, Korea in January, and the Daegu is in the mountains. And we get up there and he's like griping to me the whole time. I can't believe you went over my head and you got me out here. But he at least was fairly polite with them and eventually solved their problem. But it was snowing all day. And here we are in the mountains outside of Daegu, and it's basically a blizzard, you know, in the mountains. So he's like looking out the window all day saying, oh my God, we're going to die, you know, that kind of thing. So eventually we leave the factory, and it took about 2 hours to get down into town. At least it was downhill. And he was complaining to me the whole time how horrific this was. And so we drop him off at the hotel. I go out with the Koreans, and I'm thinking, what do they think? He solved their problem, but he's been such a pain in the butt to these people. And they were like, well, yeah, but he solved our problem. So we went out to dinner. We went out to a second place. And the third place, we went to a karaoke place in the basement of this wherever. And there was no karaoke machine. It was just a guy with a guitar, only spoke Korean. And he goes, well, what song would you, finally it's like, well, what song would you like to do? So there I am. It's like, oh my God, how bad could this be? So I sang Hey Jude. We figured out how to do, he knew how to play Hey Jude, enough of it. And I knew enough of the lyrics to do it. I sang it. I'm sure, horrible. But what happened was they were happy. You know, they bought a lot more of our product. This guy never spoke to me again, you know, after he got out of Korea. But to me, that's an example of what we all need to do is, take it to the next level. Don't be restricted by your own function. Try to understand as much as you can, and then go to whatever extent's required, even singing karaoke, you know, without any machine and without any words in front of you, because, you know, we're all just trying to do our best, and customers anywhere appreciate that. So just
so your suggestion is localization people or globalization function should push our boundaries and push our limits and go for it. Serve the company and recognized. That's your suggestion, right?
I think any function should, you know, without being a pain, right? We know those people who are functional people who say, you know, we need to do this, and, you know, we have to spend unlimited gobs of money in my function, and they don't give up, right? You have to have a give and take. You have to, at some point, understand, but the more you understand, the better equipped you'll be to make the argument that you can get more. And so that's really what I'm saying is just, you know, understand as much as you can so that you can make those arguments, but realize there's more arguments to come. So there's a place where you have to stop and keep singing is the other motto.
I know Igor is about to cut us off. I just wanted to add to that is you need to know as a leader in the company how to talk to the different parts of the organization so that the argument that works with your executive suite is different than the arguments you use to persuade your engineers, is different than the arguments I need to make with the localization folks. And throughout the company, you have to cater your arguments and the way you talk to people to match who you're talking to and what their interests are. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that was a conclusion. I mean, we have to recognize the differences and know how to talk to your customer, internal or external. That's kind of our conclusion, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Igor, for being patient there.
No problem. It was a really great discussion and really interesting stories that Doug shared. So thanks for that. We have a couple of questions in our Q&A tab. So if you can go there, Yuka, and present those, that would be great.
Yeah. So, oh my God, I don't know the answer. What are the major globalization trends for the next 5-10 years? As we don't have much time, just quickly. Who wants to go? Next.
Automation.
Okay.
And commoditization. I think we continue to see that the software has more inherent support, and the kinds of things we do have become more or less commoditized. So you can do some things the same way around the world or with the same type of support. But automation, especially in the translation space, but even automation of internationalization has been coming along and will continue.
Oh yeah, I saw it. Yeah, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite an obvious one, but definitely the digitization of emerging markets, for sure, and the way that people are getting online. But I mean, obviously, I'm coming from much more of the tech space, but the way that people are interacting with not just SaaS, but the internet. There's some amazing stats. Something like 1 million people will be getting online for the first time today, and again tomorrow, and again tomorrow. We're seeing digitization rates like we've never seen before, and so it's really just shaping, what it means what it means for people to be communicating in a more globalized world, and what that means for companies and where they need to meet their users as well. All of that's changing.
Along those lines, the audience might be interested to go to the UNESCO site and see what they're doing for what was the International Year and is now becoming the decade for Indigenous language support. So the IDIL, International Decade of Indigenous Languages, is promotion to bring along these languages that have not had digital support until now.
Right. So Doug, 5 to 10 years trend?
Well, clearly artificial intelligence on top of digital is where it's headed. And, so that I think back, in the early days, again, dating myself, the teletype machine was around when I started. And I remember just that click, 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 click sound, and just like the world felt like it was so immensely far away. And then, we got, cell phones, and now we have digital technologies to reach people, and now we have artificial intelligence telling us, hey, as long as this is your customer, you need to talk to this person. And so we've got technologies that just simplify the world so much. And so again, Kofi Annan was right that globalization is not stopping, and in fact quite the opposite. It's going to accelerate as these technologies are incorporated into businesses. So I'm really excited.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, I don't know, what is the difference of globalization definition between 1981 and 2021? I just don't know the answer. Who knows the answer?
And I can probably add to that, because I saw in the chat, Catherine Busman said that outside of the globalization industry, globalization means completely different things. Her two worlds are colliding today. So basically, I would say, and probably rephrase that, since globalization can mean different things to different people from within the industry and from outside, do you feel you have to explain it a bit more than usual? Do you have some interesting observations around that?
That was a problem. The political issue was a problem even in the 70s. So I don't see that as something that has changed. It gets accented more at different times, but that's always going to be an issue. People react to what they see as a threat to what they know, and I don't know that. I think as we become more global, people see the benefits, and I just don't see that as something that's changing. It's a different issue of how you deal with it, but it hasn't changed from over that period that the questioner was asking about.
Okay.
Is Catherine Busman the crux of this question? Is she creating trouble out there? Is that the problem?
I don't know, but we have someone who raised the hand, so they want to ask some questions live. We can probably take one. I don't know if that's Catherine or someone else, but let's see who we have.
Who raised the hand?
I believe we will have someone. So our lovely Kate, the assistant who works relatively beside this, she wanted to put someone live. Let me see. She's typing in something. Okay.
Hi, I didn't know this would actually work. I was just trying to use the only functionality that none of us have used yet today.
Yeah.
So I actually already asked the question in the Q&A section, but I think it would be worth to repeat it orally. And considering everything you've said, and I could listen to you for the whole day, like really, guys, set up your own panel for a whole day and just talk, because it's absolutely great listening to people who like you who have already done it and who are so inspiring to others. Really great job. And so this is just an occasion to send some appreciation to you. And also my question would be that you now have the chance to endorse one global organization. It can be a company, an association, a community, or a person. Anyone or anything you want. What or who do you pick? And it's a question to all the panelists. And yes, Igor, that means you too.
Can we pick our own companies?
Yeah.
That's
So I don't know. This is I'm an advisor to Translation Commons, which is a nonprofit. They support translators providing education, certification, and the like. But the piece that I'm interested in is I'm working with Translation Commons to help digitize indigenous languages. And so there are many companies and organizations that are doing great things that I could endorse, but I'm very active with this, and I think it's really important. These communities of indigenous languages are shut out from the global market. It hurts them when there's disasters or emergencies or need information about healthcare. Even in this pandemic, if you can't get information in the native language, they don't know, they don't have the right information to work with. And so helping these communities to have their language supported in the various platforms around the world, to be able to get information from their government and international organizations, I think is a really important thing. And so I volunteer and devote my time to that. So would be my endorsement at the moment. There are a lot of others, but there you go. You other guys, don't leave me hanging here by myself.
anybody besides Canva, Rachel?
Anybody besides Canva? Oddly enough, one of my colleagues who is at Canva, but her name is Renee Samadillis, and she heads up mobile growth, kind of all things mobile at Canva, and putting Canva out of the picture and focusing on her. She really has such a wonderful just grasp and passion on what it means to shape a product, to shape an experience for users. And being on mobile, again, she's really in that space of folks who are approaching digitization for the first time. A lot of these folks aren't just using Canva for the first time, they're using the internet for the first time. And the way that she's led growth through user empathy and developing that education around the function, and in the places that she's been before, she's made such an impact. And for me, she's actually a personal role model for looking towards somebody who really is able to educate around a business, a function, and what it means to truly walk in your user's shoes. She is just my shining example and a mentor for me in a lot of ways. So highly recommend anybody who's still on this call to connect with her. She's also just a lovely human being, and just smart as a whip. So okay.
Yeah, for me, I'd like to put forth a person and a company, and the person would be Catherine Bussman. I think sounds like many of you know what Catherine does on the localization side, and she's also a very capable marketer as well, and that's a deadly and good combination. So Catherine does a great podcast. She's on Clubhouse. Check her out there, and every Friday in the U.S. And so she's a champion for global and progress and localization and marketing, and like I said, that's a really good combination. From a company perspective, I mentioned Hyundai before, and I had the good fortune to visit Korea my first time before the Olympics of '88, and it was a bit of a disaster of a country, but they had a strategy and they moved it forward just like Hyundai did. And when I think about what progress they've made and how they used to pump me for like, what's Toyota doing? Because I used to visit the Japanese companies. It's like they just like, what are they doing? How are they handling this thing? They were so hungry to make an impact, and they've made so much progress. I would also say Toyota is an amazing international company. Look at the progress they have and their capabilities country to country and the positive perception. When they had that sudden acceleration problem that was not just in the US, but globally, they recovered quite quickly, much faster than Audi did, because their brand is so strong. And how do you build a brand? You know, you build a brand because you're connected locally, you know, regionally, and people want to buy the product and keep the product. And so, you know, I'm not sure I know of a better company than Toyota in terms of number of companies or countries that they not just sell a good product, but they do the right things on the ground as well.
Mm.
So with this, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. And thank you, Igor. I pass the baton to you right now.
Thank you, Yuka.
Thank
You were masterful.
Yes,
And thank you, Kate.
Yuka. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
So much.
Thank you for questions, for providing some interesting stories and insights. And yeah, it was a truly fascinating and a long day, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we are. So thank you so much.